Man, it's a cold world that we live in, bro. Like, this video actually made me sad because, it makes you reflect on the things that, people in the past went through and the possibilities of it actually happening again. Hey guys, welcome back to WWII. Obviously, you guys know already, I am GeoBoss and you guys are DE Deutschland. So thank you for watching. First of all, a channel created just for German reactions and my experience in Germany, God's willing. So yes, I'll be visiting Germany. My aim is to visit Germany once I hit 10K subscribers, where I'll have an audience to share my lovely experience with, while actually learning stuff about Germany and places that I can actually visit beforehand before going to Germany. So today we're going to be checking out this video titled "These Were Hitler's Plans for the US If He Won World War II." So we're going to be checking out this video right now. So I just want to say, if you guys have any suggestions, feel free to leave those in the comment section or click the link that I will provide for you guys in the comment section. And there's a playlist here on YouTube that you can add whatever German videos to that playlist and I'll react to it just for you guys. So without further ado, guys, let's find out what was the plans of Hitler if he had won World War II.
Hitler's goal of a German master race controlling the world required space and plenty of Aryan DNA. Little wonder that he set his sights on the US. But how detailed were his plans, and were they already underway? History is very clear about Hitler's relentless march across Europe and his desire to rebuild under the flag of the Third Reich. But what about across the Atlantic? James P. Duffy, historian and author of Target America, Hitler's Plan to Attack the United States, says that's a little less clear, and historians have long debated how much Hitler wanted. Duffy says that Hitler intended to rule the world. He cites a 1927 letter from Rudolf Hess to the London-based Nazi Walter Hevel, in which Hess wrote of Hitler preaching, "World peace will be realizable only when one power, the racially best power, has attained complete and uncontested supremacy. That power can then provide a sort of world police." This seems to confirm there were plans for even America to fall under the jurisdiction of a global Nazi law enforcement agency. Hitler definitely had his eye on the US. Although the national interest calls the Nazi attempt to build a bomber that could cross the Atlantic an idiotic waste of resources, the idea behind building something literally called the America Bomber means that the US was on Hitler's list. And that, says Duffy, was just part of it. In 1941, the Nazi regime started planning for a post-war world. First and foremost, that meant a massive navy with hundreds of submarines, anchored by 25 battleships and 150 destroyers. In the spring of 1941, Life magazine sent correspondent and former Belgian ambassador John Cudahy to report on what was happening in Germany. Cudahy got a sit-down with Adolf Hitler himself, who started by pointing out that convoys, just like the ones that the US was sending to Britain, signified war. So Cudahy got right to the point and asked Hitler what his plans were regarding the US. He explained that most Americans backed the idea of going to war against Nazi Germany because they were afraid that once Europe fell, they'd be next. Speaking through a translator, Hitler called the idea preposterous. Cudahy wrote, "He laughed at that and refused to take me seriously. He said the idea of a Western Hemisphere invasion was about as fantastic as an invasion of the moon." According to Cudahy, Hitler went on to say that he had too high an opinion of the intelligence and good sense of Americans. The logistics didn't work. Millions of troops would need to be moved across the Atlantic for the Nazis to gain a foothold in the US. That meant there was absolutely nothing for America to worry about.
Yeah, like, I've said it time and time again. It's like I'm not trying to flex America like it's, extremely overly more special than anywhere else in this world, but over that side, there's no competitor. When you think about North America, South America, there's no strong power. The closest country, I think, is the UK to America. So it's really not that easy for you to, invade or, do anything to the great United States of America. It's just not that possible. Unlike, would you say, Europe? Like, look at Finland. I'm currently in Finland, and Finland had to join NATO because what? They share a border with Russia. And who else does Finland share a border with? Freaking Sweden. And there's a lot of border, right? So you got Norway, Sweden, Finland, Russia, Belarus or Belarus or however that is said, Ukraine, all these countries, they're attached to each other. So invasion, wars, it's so much more easier. You know what I mean? So I've never really thought America is ever at risk unless it comes to nuclear wars, but it's quite unfortunate that we're even discussing about wars.
At least Hitler said so, but rational thought and reasoning weren't his strongest qualities.
Facts.
In order to talk about what Hitler might have had in store for the US, it's worth mentioning just why he might want to see that part of the world burn, at least eventually. According to University of North Carolina Emeritus Professor of History Gerhard L. Weinberg, Hitler had been writing about taking out the US as far back as the 1920s. While he wanted global domination for Germany and all that, he also felt like it was sort of his moral obligation to right a perceived wrong, and that skewed his view in favor of war with the US. It all went back to the stab-in-the-back myth, which the US Holocaust Memorial Museum describes as the belief that Germans' loss in World War I came not on the battlefield, but because of espionage, sabotage, and subterfuge on the home front. All that was, of course, supposedly led by those who would become enemies of the Nazi state, including Jews, liberals, and communists. At the same time, it meant that America didn't really have all that much to do with Germany's loss. Therefore, America wasn't a military might that needed to be contended with. But what historian and author James P. Duffy says was described as Europe's greatest future rival. That meant Hitler believed he could wrap up the war in Europe, take his sweet time building up a navy, then deal with the US.
Exactly.
Adolf Hitler famously wrote Mein Kampf, but less famously, he wrote a second book, the very directly named Hitler's Zweites Buch, or Hitler's Second Book. According to Target America, Hitler's plan to attack the United States. The book was written in 1928, but not published until 1961. It outlined a series of 3 conflicts, and it wasn't until the third one that Hitler got around to the USA. First, Hitler saw his Germany taking on France to regain what they'd lost post-World War I. Then, he was going to head east and seize all the land and agricultural resources he needed from the Soviet Union. And then, on to America, which he wrote was a real threat to German domination of the world. But here's the thing. Hitler wrote that analysis.
I mean, it's legitimate because even currently right now, if you guys know what's going on, right? Who are the countries that are trying to tie the knot together like a freaking marriage? It's going to be Russia and it's going to be China, right? Because together, 2 powerful countries can, affect one powerful country. So it's very much where he said he would take it to the east and then to America. That's very much a strategic plan that would likely work. Like just to attack, America right on, it's going to be tough. But to get like, okay, look at America being so powerful. If every country in Europe was supposed to cut ties with America and join with Russia, America's going to fall. That's just how it is.
Before the Great Depression got into full swing, as he watched what was unfolding across the Atlantic, he eventually came to the conclusion that America was so weakened by her own problems that it didn't really matter. The Third War could wait. According to Gerhard L. Weinberg, Hitler believed that wrapping up the war in Europe, stabilizing his Third Reich, and building up an army of long-range forces was all something he could take his time doing. America, he thought, was too weak to do anything but wait. There's a lot that's been written about Adolf Hitler's obsession with taking on the Soviet Union, but according to Cambridge historian Brendan Sims, he was just as obsessed with the US. So much so, Sims told ex-Berliner, that it shaped policies across the Third Reich. Sims explains that the more research he did, the more he found about Hitler's focus on America. It became absolutely obvious that Anglo-America, that's my phrase, Hitler tended to refer to them as the Anglo-Saxons, was the biggest kid on the block, his main focus, his main enemy, the partner he would have liked, the biggest element of his reality. That's a massive claim, and Sims says that there were a few layers to Hitler casting his greedy eye toward the US. Part of it started with the US having something that Germany didn't: size. Let's put that in perspective. The US is about 28 times the size of Germany, but that only tells part of the story. Germany could fit inside California and take up about only 85% of the state. It's also about the same size as Montana and New Mexico, give or take a bit. Even if Hitler had managed to take over all of Europe, building his master race would require a ton of space and a ton of resources, which America has in abundance. Adolf Hitler was front and center at World War I's Second Battle of the Marne, and according to Cambridge historian Brendan Sims, it was there that he had a run-in with two American soldiers who made a massive impression. They were tall, blonde, and blue-eyed. Sound familiar? Hitler's attempts to build his master Aryan race are well documented, and Sims says there's another, often overlooked part of that. Hitler developed a theory that one of the richest places to find all that Aryan DNA he was so obsessed with was the USA. Conquering America meant all new seeds from which his Aryan race could grow. The theory went like this. Over the course of hundreds of years, the US population had been reinforced by immigrants from Europe.
Remember, the United States is a nation of immigrants. People came here to avoid war in Europe.
They weren't just any immigrants either. They were the brightest, the strongest, the most adventurous, and the most resilient. They left behind a Europe that was overcrowded, disease-ridden, and famished. They headed west and settled in the US. There, they thrived with wide open spaces and resources of the type only America could offer. And United States laws helped reinforce his ideas about just how pure their blood was. Legislation limited or outlawed immigration from certain areas of Europe, like the Slavic countries, along with interracial marriages. In other words, he saw the US as an invaluable source of genetic material. Henry Ford is often lauded as the father of the American automobile industry. But here's the thing. While he was a genius when it came to industry and manufacturing, he was a terrible person. Ford was a raging anti-Semite.
Ford blamed the Jewish people for everything from World War to short skirts, cheap movies, and jazz music.
And PBS says that he was often quoted saying that all the world's ills could be traced back to Jews or to the Jewish capitalists. And if that's the sort of thing that seems like it would have Hitler singing "You've Got a Friend in Me," it absolutely was. According to Bradley W. Hart, author of Hitler's American Friends, it was even more than that. Ford was spouting anti-Semitic rhetoric long before mainstream America knew about things like the concentration camps, and his views didn't go unnoticed by Hitler. According to research from The Nation, Ford profited heavily from manufacturing for the Third Reich, even for months after the US officially declared war. A contemporary report from the US Treasury Department shows they knew about it, summed up in this observation. There would seem to be at least a tacit acceptance by Ford's son, Mr. Edsel Ford of the Reliance, on the known neutrality of the Ford family as a basis of receipt of favors from the German Reich.
In July 1938, Ford accepted Germany's Grand Cross, the highest honor the Third Reich could bestow on a foreigner.
Hart goes on to say that Hitler saw Ford as a way into America, and he uncovered records describing how Hitler had tapped Heinrich Ford to become what Hitler described as the leader of the growing fascist movement in America. World War II usually plays out as an Allies versus Axis conflict, but it wasn't that neat and tidy. According to
I genuinely didn't know that him and Ford was tied up like that. I had no idea. I literally did not know.
the National World War II Museum, the US had a faction of Nazis that weren't just alive and well, they were holding rallies at venues like Madison Square Garden. The German-American Bund dated back to 1936, and the entire idea behind the organization was to promote all the ideals and racial hatred that went along with being a Nazi. That Madison Square Garden event attracted about 22,000 loyal members in 1939, and it was done under the command of a German World War I veteran named Fritz Kuhn. The Bund, of course, got the attention of the House Committee on Un-American Activities, and while they were found not to be a threat to national security, there is an interesting footnote. One of the claims used to discredit the Bund was that Kuhn reported directly to Hitler and that Hitler was meddling in US affairs. It makes sense that Hitler would be thrilled to have a Nazi party ready and waiting for him. But not only was that not true, but according to traces, Hitler outright denounced the party. Why? Because the Nazis thought the Bund was giving them a bad name. Names like Dachau and Auschwitz are instantly recognizable, but they made up only a sliver of a percentage of the facilities the Nazi regime built to contain, enslave, and execute those they didn't like. Here's a terrifying statistic. According to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, there were more than 44,000 camps of varying purposes, all detention and incarceration based, that were active during the Third Reich. Would those camps have been set up in North America? According to the CBC, probably. In 2019, the Library and Archives Canada purchased a book that had been taken from Hitler's personal library. It was called what translates to Statistics, Press, and Organizations of Jewry in the United States and Canada. The
Bro,
137
they cannot allow something like this to happen again. Like, and I just know it's gonna happen again. Like, humans are so doo doo, man. Like, I know it's gonna happen again. It's just it. Listen, World War II. Okay, it's not the first major war in this world. It might have been the worst, but it ain't the first, right? And it's only gonna get worse and worse and worse. And I'm so sure that this is not gonna be the last, right? I may not witness it. We may not witness it, but the future is definitely gonna witness it. Like, if it's been so long and it's so hard to dry or to get rid of all of the hate that is in this world regarding, because there are still people out there who rocking with it, like they rocking with the Nazis, and they like, yeah, Hitler, blah blah blah, they rocking with this. So to think about it, when it hits you, you're like, bro, there's a high chance of this happening again. All it needs is just manipulation, motivation, and that's it. You get a bunch of people, manipulate them, motivate them, and it just spreads like COVID, right? So it's tough and it's sad, but I definitely don't think this is the last.
page book is essentially a compilation of data on Jewish populations across North America.
What this book shows us is that there was already the beginnings of a plan, had the war gone differently, that the Holocaust would have happened here.
And as the LAC curator Michael Kent explained, this information would have been the building blocks to rolling out the final solution in Canada. The book, written by Nazi linguist Heinz Kloss, details things from ethnicity and languages of cities' populations to listing Jewish organizations. And Kent further explained to The Guardian that the book is essentially proof that Hitler and the Nazi Party had plans to expand the Holocaust to North America. Kent said, "The Holocaust wasn't a European event. It was an event that didn't have the opportunity to spread out of Europe."
That's big facts. That's big facts. I totally believe that as well. Like, though it's hard to get over to North America, it's not impossible, right? It's not impossible, right? But it's difficult, but it's not impossible. And the best way would have been to, capture the neighbors of Germany and move east, right? Where you get a lot more power and strength. And if they beat freaking USSR, Russia, like, yeah, they're good now. They can actually rebuild, probably in 4 or 5 years, and they're gonna just invade America, and that would have been it. I can't imagine that world existing, man. That's whew. Man, it's a cold world that we live in, bro. Like, this video actually made me sad because, it makes you reflect on the things that, people in the past went through and the possibilities of it actually happening again, which is very much there. The possibilities are literally there. It's sad, but yeah, it is what it is, man. But thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you guys think about this video. It's a very interesting video, and let me know what you guys think were the plans of Hitler. Do you think he would have actually invaded America and bring